I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Zies Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark.
Welcome everyone to the second part of our biased reactions on the Advanced Player's Guide.
So biased this time. So biased, I'm the design lead. That's really biased. Okay.
So let's pick up right where we left off. Which is at the start of the class chapter.
Alright, well, just like in the core rulebook, the class chapter has those little boxes that have a little icon for the class and the name of the class and some information about the class that shows you the class icon. But something that's new in this introduction is that there's sort of a little, on the right side, a little icon plus the name of the class, and then something new for that class that is found in that chapter with like a summary of what the through line is. So for instance, Bard says, perform new compositions, learn new and unusual tricks, or find amuse in the heat of battle. So it has new information for all of the classes. We're going to focus on that right column more than the left column because we have class chat episodes that dive deeply into any particular class.
So to clarify, those aren't just about what the class does. Those are about what new content you can find for that class.
It's a through line of new content for the class.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just random new content. Each of the sets of new content had some kind of a through line or connecting point that sort of went through the content.
So yeah, let's talk about classes, shall we?
So first up is the Investigator. We're not going to deep dive into the Investigator because that would be a class chat Investigator, but Investigators, they're detectives, they like solving mysteries, they definitely devise stratagems in combat and pull those through to hit their enemies. They seem to be ridiculously good at this one mini game that we were playing in a converted Hell's Rebels where you have to like try to hit particular targets and you get plus points for hitting it and minus points for missing it because devise a stratagem towards the middle of the hardness of the targets, and if it's obviously a success, then attack that one, and if it's not, then attack the easy target. But they also have lots of fun investigating methods so that you can play different kinds of investigators and feats with different sorts of investigations.
They're well known for being good at noticing clues and good at sharing and good at gathering and sharing knowledge.
They're a smarty pants.
Yes.
That's the Investigator.
Mm-hmm.
How about the Oracle? So the Investigator's iconic was Quinn, who's the Investigator before, but the Oracle, we have an all-new iconic Korakai, the Tengu Oracle. So that's pretty awesome.
So as compared to in Pathfinder 1st Edition, where the Oracle had sort of the mystery and the curse as two separate pieces, in Pathfinder 2nd Edition Oracles, those are all tied together as a part of one big package where it's the flip side of the coin. The benefits and the detriments are thematically connected.
Yes, the curse fits with what type of Oracle you are, rather than just like, no matter what type of Oracle you are, you're always like legalistic or tongues or one of those other ones where you didn't really have any drawbacks.
But to step back a little bit, Oracle's whole shtick is you are a conduit to divine power, but being a conduit to divine
power from everywhere
comes at a price because because bodies aren't really meant to withstand all of that. But you can figure out a way to manage it.
It's not like the gods giving you the safety of an amount that they know is going to be okay. It's just like, whoa, it's all coming in and it's fire and I'm burning up. So yeah, that's Oracle's deal. They're a divine spellcaster with all sorts of different mysteries and curses, and like they get different benefits. Like life oracles have a ton of hit points for a spellcaster. No other spellcaster has that many hit points as the life oracle. So they have unique benefits and some weird and oracular abilities. What about the Swashbuckler?
So the Swashbuckler is a class that's certainly very different from its first edition incarnation, and
there's the iconic Jirel.
Yes, the iconic is
she's the same.
She's the same, yes.
I am a little bit familiar with the Swashbuckler, as it turns out. So the Swashbuckler goes back to the roots of the stories of Swashbucklers and tries to deliver that playstyle more so than the playstyle that Pathfinder First Edition delivered, which wasn't super swashbuckly. And so they go around doing outlandish things in the middle of a fight and then making ridiculous finishers on people. That's basically their situation.
They're dexterous and speedy. They might go about things from using braggadocio or wit, or they might favor being quick on their feet as their way of being flashy and stylish on the battlefield.
That's right. So last but not least is Witch, and we've got Faya the Witch, and Daji, her fox familiar, who has been upgraded to have 9 tails.
Who appears on the cover.
That's right. So Witch have a mysterious patron, and the patron grants magic. But one thing that changed is that Witches used to be just sort of an arcane spellcaster with a kind of weird list of witchy spells that were just like, would a witch do this? Maybe. Will they do a lightning bolt? Yes. Fireball? No. Why? Witches have these spells. But now they can be any of the 4 kinds of traditions of a spellcaster, depending on what kind of patron the witch has for their mysterious patrons. And they are the undisputed masters of familiars. Only really a familiar thesis wizard can give them a run for their money on that. Plus they have hexes, including a hex cantrip that they can just spam all the time.
So there's a wide variety of different types of patrons that you might have, as well as lessons that you can learn from your patron if you are a witch.
That's right. So that are the 4 new classes. If you like them, then vote for them when we have the vote back in for new episodes in class chats. But for now, let's move on to the old classes, starting with Alchemist.
With the toxicologist research field. Now, as I recall, this is one of those things that there was an idea for a poisoner alchemist floating around earlier, but it wasn't something that made it into the core rulebook.
That's right. That was like the 4th one that would have been on the cutting room floor, and so we pulled it out. And one of the proponents who likes poisoners a lot, John Compton, really wanted to do some poisoner alchemist stuff. So John did some really cool stuff with the toxicologist research field, some new feats. It's got some of which are poison related, but some of which aren't, like perpetual breath that lets you pick up some more perpetual types of alchemy that are outside of your usual field.
And healing bomb is kind of the opposite of poison, if you think about it.
I mean, in some ways you could say it is like a poison, but for your damage.
But I mean, on a critical success, the target would also get the elixir's item bonus to saving throws against diseases and poison. Yeah. That's why I said it.
It's like a poison for poison.
Yes.
It poisons the poison so that you're not poisoned. Anti-poison.
That is a way of thinking of it, yes.
And that's that. I mean, those are some cool ones. There's a lot of poison, obviously, that are on here. There's some weird stuff like unstable concoction, where you try to create an alchemical item that you can't normally make, and you hope that it works.
Hopefully it does. You might create something awesome, and it might spectacularly explode.
You never know.
You never know. I mean, this really seems to me like something Fumbus would have.
Potentially. So, yeah, that's what we got going on for the Alchemist. For Barbarian, there's a few different things. First of all, there's the Superstition Instinct, which Toxicologist was like an idea that we might have wanted to do in the core rules, but that we didn't do. But Superstition Instinct just flat out was in the playtest and was deemed to be a little bit advanced. It has a really harsh anathema that just in some groups is gonna really not even work for that group. And it's got some advanced abilities that can be even more powerful than normal for abilities. Normally, Anathema don't really balance out more powerful abilities, but this one does. It even says your extremely restrictive Anathema grants you powers beyond those of other instincts, because the Anathema actually goes to a mechanical point where it's like, yeah, and you're not taking spells from your allies. But you can You can sunder magic and do all sorts, and you get a huge bonus to saves against magic and do all sorts of fun things. Plus, there's just a bunch of barbarian feats, and a lot of them have some really good stuff that you can do, like oversized throw to throw the table.
As
Or
you can
even-
see Amiri doing right here on
Yeah,
this page.
or even more importantly, friendly toss at level 8, where you throw your friends. You could throw any kind of thing if you're a barbarian.
But it's not all about throwing things. You might also
You could have impressive landing in case the other barbarian threw you, and you want to make sure that you land impressively for when after you've been thrown.
Or, you know, if you're a superstition instinct barbarian, you might want to have Mage Hunter so that any time that someone casts a spell within your reach, you're just like, nope, pow. No
Yep.
spell casting for you.
Oh, it didn't have a manipulate? I don't care. It was a spell. I'm hunting you.
I don't like the spells.
And Sunder Spell, where you just kind of break apart spells. That's also for them. There's also just some other fun things, like anytime you get critically hit, you just smack them because of your Furious Vengeance. Or Shattering Blows, where you could ignore objects' hardness. Even Unstoppable Juggernaut at level 20, where you gain a gigantic amount of resistance, and when reduced to 0 hit points, you could end your rage as a reaction to stay at 1 hit point, but you become super wounded.
There's a bunch of fun reactions on here too, like Tangle of Battle. When you critically hit an adjacent enemy, you also just get to grab them too.
Yeah, that's a fun one. Just like, get over here. Or you can embrace the pain. Anytime they hit you, you try to grab them. Like, grab onto the weapon. It's like just bleeding through it, and you hold on to them, and they're like, what are you even doing?
Winning.
Winning.
That's what the barbarians do.
You're
Winning.
I'm barbarian.
And barbarian.
Barbarian.
Yes. How about the Bard?
Well, Bard's got some new stuff. First of all, there's just a brand new muse called the Warrior Muse. They are very much Skald-like the Skald class from PF1. They even literally have, like, a marching thing, I think, that and, like, a Song of Strength that is super similar to a Skald. But their deal is they're a little more combat-focused, so you get martial performance feat, which gives you martial weapons. And then you can get a bunch of special effects that can allow you to, like a commander, like, move around your allies and have them make extra attacks when you're doing Inspire Courage on them, or help defend them with Inspire Defense, which is pretty cool if you want just sort of like a heavily combat-focused martial kind of bard.
I just see comments here on 2 barbarians throwing an ally and a single rogue. They just toss back and forth. Now I'm imagining, like, the barbarians take out the net and decide to play toss the rogue, and then the next time they try to find the net, the rogue has stolen and hidden it, and they're never gonna find it again.
Yep.
No more toss the rogue.
And there's other different fun things for the bard as well. They actually have 4 pages, like the barbarian.
Yes.
But unlike the alchemist. So the bard can have accompaniments. They can even do, like, some kind of an earworm where they just get a song stuck in someone's head. They've got some new focus spells that we'll go into all the focus spells when we get to the spells, but like Ode to Ouroboros to keep your allies alive from death. There's a healing one at first level that can heal your allies pretty well. It's pretty solid for if you want to be the healer bard. Call and response, where you do a call and then, like, your allies do a response so that they can keep up your bardic performance.
Soulsight's pretty cool. Open your eyes to the world beyond and gain spirit sense.
Yeah, why not? You could do that. You're a bard. You do lots of things. There's also All in My Head at level 18, where you just have used your bardic nature to convince yourself that something that happened to you was just kind of figment of your own imagination, and you change its damage type to mental damage and make it non-lethal.
How about the 20th level Ultimate Polymath, where all of the spells in your repertoire become signature spells?
Yeah, that's for the people who are like, oh, it's not an overburdening problem. If all my spells were signature spells, it wouldn't make my turn take a really long time. And I'd be like, That's true for me, and it probably is true for you if you think that that's true. Not most players. So take Ultimate Polymath, and hopefully your turn won't take a long time, but you have so many options, especially if you take it with some of the other Polymath options, and then you have more things in your repertoire, all of which are signature spells. Also, piping that forces things to follow around after you. There's a lot of stuff here in the Bard. Definitely. Alright, Champion. They have the most pages. They have so many pages that they took pages from the pages so they could page while they paged.
Well, this starting off here with the introduction of Evil Champion.
That's why they have so many pages.
The champion banner can hold all alignments now.
Well, all good and evil ones anyway, but not neutral. For now.
For now. Well, I'm saying that the idea of champion is no longer like, oh, this is the paladin, we need a new name for this or whatever.
Yes, that's right. And the tenets of evil allow you to do that. You can get fun tenets like never performing acts of anathema to your deity. You're doing a good act, such as giving something solely out of charity, casting a good spell, or using a good item, putting another person's deeds before your own. So we actually read out the tenets and talked about these in detail in Class Chats Champion, because they're actually like a set of tenets, which was an important part of the champion. So I encourage you to go to that episode if you want to see the basics about these evil champions. But yeah, basically, instead of protecting others, they often are doing some kind of thing where they are punishing their enemies. Although the neutral evil one has a selfish shield that is a weaker version of the protection, but protects yourself instead of your allies. There's also a bunch of feats. Some of them are obviously the feats to support the evil champions, because a ton of the feats for the original champion were good aligned and you couldn't take them. There's also feats that, like, and nobody's going to complain about Desperate Prayer. That's a solid once-a-day feat to just get back a focus point when you're out of focus points. For example, or Esoteric Oath can let you make an oath against aberrations. But, obviously, it's a little skewed towards the evil champions. They didn't have anything before. There's still some cool feats like Invigorating Mercy that give you new different uses for your mercy, and Sacrifice Armor, which really anybody can use if they want to sacrifice their armor to protect themselves. Personally, I like my armor, but if you want to sacrifice your armor, you're definitely going to get a lot of damage reduction out of it. Of course, Pale Horse for the evil champion, where your steed, you can ride a pale horse.
And there's also a fair bit that is tied into oaths.
Yes.
In here as well, such as the ability to enforce an oath, calling upon your oath in combat for assistance.
That's right. There's all sorts of fun things to do involving oaths.
And there's several abilities as well that bolster lay on hands in different ways, causing your lay on hands to have extra effects, such as granting temporary hit points, or even speeding up your allies.
There's a lot of different fun things you can do for the champion. Who's next after the champion?
It's the cleric.
The cleric. Well, the cleric didn't make out like a bandit like the champion. They used to have 2 solid pages with new premonitions your deity can send to you to try to protect you from danger, as well as some other fun and useful feats like rapid response, where as a reaction when your ally goes to 0 hit points, you move up to them because you know that you're gonna have to be healing them next turn.
Very convenient, and it can definitely make the difference between life and death.
Yep.
For your party.
That's right. Also, Miraculous Possibility, where just, like, for one of your spell slots, you don't really prepare anything, and you just, like, call out to your deity in a moment of need for, like, whatever you want. It's a lower level than the spell that you would have gotten if you let them know in advance, but...
Yeah. Cleric also has a self-sacrifice option here in the form of Martyr, where you can damage yourself while healing to provide healing to your allies.
Sometimes your allies need the healing more than you.
Yeah, sometimes they definitely do.
Yep. Absolutely. plus some other interesting things where you can share the premonitions that you have with your ally, or even to kind of mix around depending on what type of font you have. Plus, you can get some extra benefits with different types of healing. What about Druid?
What about Druid? So, what kind of things does the Druid have going on here?
Druid has a lot of very thematic abilities. So they have Verdant Weapon, where they sprout like a seed into a weapon, which is pretty cool. And it has a follow-up Pristine Weapon that is even cooler. You've got Elemental Summons, where you can replace your spells with Elemental Summons. Leshy Familiar Secrets, where your Leshy Familiar gets an extra special Leshy ability. There's Current Spell, where you kind of divert the currents when you cast air and water spells. Wandering Oasis,
That
you're
seems
just surrounded
super
by an
convenient
oasis.
for when you're traveling. It's just like, oh, I'm just going to... Here we go. Were we walking through a scorching desert?
Yep. Reactive Transformation,
It's
where
not
you
hot here at
you
all.
suddenly wild shape into one of your wild shapes. Let me see. You transform reactively in danger. You cast wild shape to transform into one form granted by one of the prerequisite feats, depending on the trigger. So it's like, oh, I'm falling. I suddenly turn into a bird.
Oh, I just took energy damage. I suddenly resist that because I turned into the right kind of dragon.
Yep. It's pretty powerful when it works, because of the fact that it saves you a ton of actions. But on the other hand, turning into a red dragon against a fiery thing might not be as useful. So you kind of have to balance those factors. Sow Spell, where you sow a seed with a spell instead of a weapon. That can be very useful, because then the seed can sprout to produce the spell.
As a reaction.
Yep. Pretty handy. It has to be triggered when a creature enters the zone spell space. But you could definitely, your enemies aren't necessarily going to do you the favor of going where you want, but you could definitely have some kind of beneficial spell that is sown around, and then somebody comes into the spot to get healed because you put some healing in a plant down there.
Or you can do things to encourage them to stand in a particular space based on the way that the space is set up and the way that your allies are positioned.
Plus Primal Aegis, where you get a bunch of resistance to a bunch of things. And your allies. It's a lot. It's
How
18th
about the
level.
fighter?
Fighter already had a lot of feats in the core rulebook, and it's got more feats here. It's got pretty much every kind of weird fighter thing, like presses and flourishes and stances and those kind of things. It's got going for it again in here. So they can hit people and figure out about their strengths and weaknesses with combat assessments, or drag people around, bounce things off when they throw them, charge it through the enemies, even more ricocheting, try to daze the enemy. There's some cut from the air, where you just kind of cut a ranged attack directly out of the air and smash from the air, where you can even do that against a spell. Overwhelming Blow at level 16, where you 3 actions just make a melee strike, and if it hits, it's always a critical. And if you roll a critical hit, it becomes deadly, and whether or not you hit, you become stunned and flat-footed.
And on a similar note to that ultimate polymath ability from the Bard of feats that are there for people who want extreme flexibility.
Ultimate flexibility.
We have ultimate flexibility, which is an upgrade of improved flexibility to gain even more fighter feats that you can swap around.
And you only spend an hour to switch them. It's different than the Bard, though, because the Bard, it's your turn. It's like, okay, Lem, it's your turn. What are you gonna do? It's like, well, I've got up to 4 spells per level in my repertoire from that other feat. And they're all signature spells. So I know I want to cast something in one of my 9th level slots. So that means I want to cast one of these 36 spells from my 9th level slots.
Well,
this one, on your turn, you still know what you're doing. It's just that, after the fight, it's like, oh, we're facing those kind of enemies. Give me 10 minutes out of character and 1 hour in character, and I will reassign these 3 feats to get a combo that will work against them. So it's a little kind of strategy versus tactics situation.
Yeah, but it's still something that'll have you considering a lot of options.
Yeah,
so it's very fitting for the advanced player's guide.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for the subs.
Yeah, thanks for the subs, everybody. We're glad to have you. All right, so what about Monk?
What about Monk? So I see that Monk has got a bunch of more stance options going on
They
here.
do. They have, including monastic archer stance, where you use archery as a monk. Gorilla stance, where you kind of fight like an ape. Stumbling stance, where you kind of like act like someone who's drunk. You're not actually drunk necessarily. You usually aren't when you're doing a stumbling stance.
Shooting star stance for a flurry of shurikens.
Yeah, absolutely. Ancestral weaponry, where you do stuff with your ancestry's weapons.
Cobra stance, where you could make
Poison.
Cobra fang arm attacks that deal poison.
Purely poison. Peafowl stance with a sword. There's a lot of stances. Plus 1-inch punch, where you're just like, and you do this gigantic punch. Upgrades to 1mm punch, where it gets so much more powerful that it changes to the metric system.
There you go.
Yep. That's much more powerful. Plus, you can get other special abilities. Clinging Shadows Initiate, where you go into a Clinging Shadows stance with a key spell that puts up these weird shadow attacks on your enemies. You can get Clinging Fire, which is based on using Flurry Blows to make ranged piercing attacks. So it kind of helps with, for example, Monastic Archer stance.
And there's also feats to upgrade some of the stances
All
that
the
you see in the
stances
forest.
have feats.
All of them, yeah.
They always,
I see.
always do. So they have generally like level 1 stances have a level 6 upgrade feat, and this is no different. And then level 10 upgrade feats as well. For some of the ones that are higher level.
I got it. I missed the focus shot monastic archer here on the next page.
Oh yeah. Monastic Archer's got Focus Shot for its sort of third, because a lot of the stances have, like, potentially have 2 follow-ups. And Monastic Archer does 2. You could focus and do a Focus Shot. Shadow's got Shadow's Web as an upgrade. There's all sorts of things. They're not all related to the stances. Medusa's Wrath, if you just want to turn someone to stone. I mean, like you do. Key Center, where you can, as a free action, once per minute, cast a single action key spell with the stance trait without spending a focus point. That's very handy if you're reliant on a focus spell stance like the Shadow one there, or the Wild Wind stance. Key Form, where you just go over 9,000 and turn into this ridiculous key form that's like glowing with your emotions. Or even Deadly Strike, where your attacks become deadly, which is pretty handy. Deadly D10 is a pretty powerful benefit. Alright, what about Rangers? So Rangers' big deal is they've got Warden spells, which are Ranger focus spells. They did not have those before. Spells like Gravity Weapon to increase the damage of your first hit on the round, or Heal Companion to heal your animal companion. Things like that. Snare Hopping, when you put the snare in the wrong place and you want to move it somewhere else. Now that you know where the right place is. Not everything in here is Warden spells. There's still some non-Warden spells, like Additional Recollection, where you try to recall knowledge about a different creature after you do so on your hunted prey. All the different kinds of things that Rangers kind of like. But it is like
mostly
90% Warden spells.
So that means that we'll be talking about this section a lot more when we get to the spells chapter.
That's true.
And actually start
the
digging
20th
into
level
what some of
feats
these
aren't
do.
Warden spells, though. There's Accurate Flurry, where your Impossible Flurry is even more accurate. And Impossible Snares, where you can make certain amounts of snares that do not even count against your already very large number of snares. Alright.
All the traps.
All the traps. What about Rogue?
Rogue has some more racket options.
That's right. The Eldritch Trickster, which uses magic, and the Mastermind, which uses smarts to plan the heist. And we talked about those in the Rogue episode already. So they round out your kind of general leverage or oceans team of rogues and fill you out. Now you have all the ones that you need with Eldritch Trickster and the Mastermind. And there's, of course, feats that will sort of fill out the Eldritch Trickster and Mastermind, but there's a ton that don't. That
Yeah,
are just
like
something
planting
else.
evidence.
you always want to be able to plant evidence on someone, right? Or just a bunch that are dealing with like thrown weapons or doing some like dirty tricks to your opponents in the middle of a fight. Stomp on their head. Like who does that? Even the barbarian doesn't necessarily stomp on someone's head, but the rogue does because it's the rogue.
Anticipating ambushes because you're so experienced with ambushes that you know what they look like.
Yep, it's like you have to get up pretty early in the morning to ambush a rogue. So when the enemies are using stealth for initiative and you're using perception for initiative to plan for an ambush, they all just take a -2 circumstance penalty, period, to their stealth checks. That's not just against you. You don't just go faster. You just screw up their ambush, and it doesn't do well. It's great for like a rogue who's scouting around, because there's plenty of ways to get like the scout's warning or whatever it is to give a circumstance bonus to your team.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. But this is one of the only ways to just flat out give a circumstance penalty to the other team, and when you add that together, you wind up with like a +4 net difference, right? With a -2 and a +2.
Which is really
that's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge. And the rogues have all sorts of other fun things like that they can do. You can steal some loner spells from a friend. You can prepare to get, by spending an action, to get an extra reaction if you really want to make a lot of reactions. You can do certain things that like the investigator does too that are sort of mastermindy, like implausible purchases, and even steal spells directly out of people's minds.
Stay down is funny too.
Yes, you stay down. They try to get up from being tripped,
and you use a
like,
reaction to smack them back down again.
No, you're not getting up. No. And you waste their action. It's 14th level for a reason, because it is really obnoxious. You would not want this to happen to you.
Yes.
All right.
How about the sorcerers? Got some new bloodlines here.
That's right. We talked about the genie, nymph, psychopomp, and shadow bloodlines in detail when we went through the sorcerer. Did we? I think we did.
Yeah, we talked about all the bloodlines when we did class chat sorcerer.
I think we did. We've done all the class chats except wizard at this point. Is that right?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. So that, and there are still some feats that are not entirely related to JD, Nymph, Psychopomp, and Shadow bloodlines, though. There's Ancestral Blood Magic, where your blood magic effect helps your ancestry spells as well as your sorcerer spells. You can anoint allies with blood runes so that you can give blood magic effects that are normally personal only to your ally. You can split your shots or make little vortices and all sorts of other things.
You can put an elaborate
to mess
flourish
with
in your spells to make it harder for people to detect what you're casting.
He's shooting dragons made out of force again. Everything is dragons. Oh, wait, that was just magic missile, but now it's too late.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. You can use the ally use one of your allies to make yourself the point of origin for the spell with the power in your blood. So an ally casts a spell, and you're like, oh, here, I'm 30 feet from you, and your target is 30 feet from me, so just use me as a conduit. That's a reaction. They've got Soul Sight as well, if they are a divine or occult, like the one that you were talking about with bards.
Mm-hmm.
Also, let's see what else is in here that's cool. So there's already a type of evolution that were for the sorcerers that had either mental or vital essence in the core rulebook at a certain level. So the ones with mental are occult and arcane, and the ones with vital are primal and divine. So this rounds it out by having a feat for anyone with physical essence, aka arcane and primal, or spiritual essence, divine and occult. Where spiritual essence makes your magic able to be extremely spiritual, and physical essence lets you just kind of turn into a polymorph, even if you just don't have that spell as a signature spell in your repertoire. You just cast a polymorph. You're like, no, yeah, I know how the world works. I can turn into this.
What about consume spell? That's funny. You literally feed off of magic.
It's delicious.
It's delicious,
it gives
and it
you a
heals
meal. It gives you a nice meal.
So somebody tried to somebody tried to cast a spell at you. You countered it, and you healed from it.
Yeah, why not? You can make Shroud of Magic around you, spells that scintillate and distract people, spells that terraform the area,
Spells that echo and reverberate.
or have a bloodline mutation where you just permanently become more like the thing that you have bloodline for, like growing wings and be like, yeah, no, I've got wings. That's just what I do now. And possibly gaining a massive amount of resistance against that a certain energy type. All sorts of other possibilities. What about wizards? Those are the last, but not the very end of the chapter, because there's also some animal companions.
The staff nexus.
Ah, yes.
Thesis.
You have a nexus in your staff that is very important to you, and you can do all sorts of things with staves and put even more charges into the staff, giving you a huge amount of flexibility with what you're going to cast when you have the right spells in your staff. It's super cool if you're good at planning out what spells are going to be in your staff versus what you prepare, because it gives you more flexibility.
Speaking of flexibility, non-lethal spells seem super useful.
Yeah, level 2, and just be like, yeah, non-lethal, whatever. You can have Spellbook Prodigy, where you can learn spells more easily. There's some low-level stuff in here. Convincing Illusion, where somebody succeeds against your illusion but does not critically succeed, and as a reaction you're like, wait, and you use a deception check to trick them into not being quite sure that they should have been able to disbelieve the illusion. You can split your spell slot into multiple slots and possibilities. You can stay into a polymorph form for longer by using a lower level version of the spell. You can use a Diviner Sense to roll initiative twice to take the better result when you're detecting magic for your exploration tactic if the enemy has magic.
And a lot of enemies do, particularly at the higher levels.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You can use Forcible Enemy to give an enemy weakness to a damage type that hopefully all of your allies have, like a rune that does that damage type, and then you just wreck them. Second Chance Spell, when your enchantment doesn't do anything and you're just like, yeah, okay, I cast it again, whatever.
There's Spell Mastery, where you've mastered a handful of spells so much that you don't have to prepare them. They're just automatically prepared every time you make your daily preparation.
In addition to all your other spells. It's like, yeah, okay. I get this 9th level spell, and this 8th level spell, and this 7th level spell, and this 6th level spell.
Mm-hmm.
I just always have those. You took my spell book, whatever.
Doesn't matter.
Alright. So, last but not least,
we have more animal companions
and familiars.
Yes.
So, these are more options for your animals. You've got Ape, which can do a frightening display and threaten things and is very intimidating. There's the Arboreal Sapling, which is technically not an animal because it's a plant.
So naturally, you need to be a member of the Leaf Order to have...
If you want free access. Anybody could take it if they have an animal companion.
Yeah, to have access to this one.
If you're a Leaf Order with Order Explorer, between that and Animal Order to get the animal companion, you get access without needing any special permission. And then you can have Groot, and you can throw rocks at people, and have the plant root around your foe, and do all sorts of fun things. There's also Bat. And Bat can fly around and flap in people's faces and thrash about at the enemies.
A charging, rampaging boar.
Yeah, why would you not want a charging, rampaging boar?
Crocodiles as well, which, as you might expect, have a death roll.
They do. They have the exact death roll that you would expect. And not only do they have that exact death roll that you would expect, they also can clamp their jaws on your foes as support benefit. They are good on land and in the water. Riding Drake, which is technically a dragon, and you can ride it, pretty handy. It's actually faster than a horse. It's got less dexterity, so you might want to wear a heavier barding. But if you do, you're still probably about the same speed as the horse because you're already faster than the horse. You've got a breath weapon and can shoot out some fire at people. You can have a scorpion that can grab and sting things and potentially deal persistent poison damage.
Quite useful.
Shark is just your best bet if you're just in the water. They can smell blood up to a mile away in the water.
And they can rip and tear and shred their foes.
Why not? It's a shark. And then familiars. There's all sorts of new familiar abilities. You can have a familiar that accompanies you on your musical instrument. or helps you regains hit points when you refocus. One that's independent and kind of does an action every round that you normally decide how to spend it, but the GM might determine it's going to do its own thing if you have an independent familiar. Just sometimes it's not going to listen to you because if you don't command it, if you command it, it still does. But sometimes you just like don't you say nothing. It usually does what you would have wanted it to do. And sometimes it does what it wants. It's kind of a fun role play thing that it's not always doing exactly what you're asking for, but it's kind of cool if you don't have the actions to command it that it's also kind of working in your favor. You can have it be a partner in crime to help you in crime.
It might be able to change shape into a humanoid of your ancestry.
Or a plant, if it's a Leshy, for example. If it's one of those alchemical familiars, it might like have a poison reservoir. Could have damage resistances. Be super skilled in something that most familiars aren't. A little bit of spells, ability to use tools. Touch, telepathy, a lot of extra hit points, or valet, where if you command your familiar, so that wouldn't work with independent because it only works if you command it, then it doesn't use its 2 actions immediately on your command, but up to twice until the end of the turn, it then will interact to retrieve items and then bring it to you, which is actually twice as many actions worth of value. It's very handy if you need to get stuff. Plus, you get the master abilities where you get an innate surge from your familiar and get an innate spell from your ancestry feat.
Or you can share senses and project your senses onto your familiars. Super useful for scouting out.
And last but not least is a new type of rule, specific familiars. It's not new to our bias reactions because we talked about later books that also had them. Some of which were not that much later because of coordination and teamwork.
Yay, teamwork!
So if you have a ton of master abilities sitting around, possibly because you're a witch, or a familiar master wizard, or familiar thesis wizard, or the familiar master archetype, which we'll get to next time, you can have some specific familiars, and they require a certain number of abilities, but then they give you generally more total abilities than they require, including unique abilities such as a fairy dragon's euphoric breath weapon, or an imp invisibility and infernal temptation, or the spell slime, which is just a friendly slime that is made of the type of essences that comes out of your spells, that has ooze defenses and a magic scent for that type of magic, and slime rejuvenation.
I like that they're only available to people who cast spells using spell slots, with the implication that they probably came from your own spells.
They likely did, but some people, like an alchemist, can get familiar without having any spells, and so they would not have a spell slime because they're not like a spelly familiar, or like a fighter who just has familiar master and no magic. And then you need to be able to cast spells because that determines the magic scent ability of your spell slime. So that's super cool, and it just opens up a large field for specific familiars later down the line, which we've seen has begun to be felt as well. All right, so that is the end of the class chapter, getting us ready for archetypes.
So shall we say goodbye to YouTube?
Let's do it. Bye, YouTube. See you next time.
Bye.